My daughter's biggest difference maker is Patrick Smith, and I can't see him in front of me for some reason, but I'm going to introduce to you Patrick Smith, and there you are. Aw, I love you. Seriously, he's now my coworker, and Faith says all the time, it's so unfair that you get to see him all the time and I don't. So, all right, here he is.
Marianne, I'm hopeful. Is sound working now? Awesome. It wouldn't be a camp experience if we didn't have some craziness happening. Good morning. Thank you, Marianne, for that really kind introduction. I am very fortunate that I get to be on the receiving end of lots of that, whether it's emails or in greeting parents that come or as they depart camp. But I have to say that I am the lucky person that gets to work with an amazing group of staff, donors, volunteers, just all the folks that work here are the ones that actually make the difference with kids. I just sometimes get the benefit. So it's very kind of you, thank you. But I know that it's not something that we can do alone. And certainly we would not be here today if camp hadn't started. So we're grateful for all the folks that help make camp happen. So once again, good morning and welcome to our first Family Care Conference. Thank you very much for being here. Now, I am so used to speaking in front of people, but this is a little strange for me. I would much rather be in the same room with you all. And I think we probably all would. That connection and that community is really important. But this is kind of what the world has given us. And so I guess we'll all just agree to do our best with what we have. Hang on one second. I know this sounds a little loud. I'm coming right into where you are right now, and I will change this. So just talk amongst yourselves really quick. Is that better? Yes? Awesome. I'm so used to using my outdoor voice, even when I'm indoors, and we're in kind of a room in our health center. So it might be booming a little bit. So thank you for that feedback. But anyway, when speaking to a group, it's always great because you get to get a sense of the energy in the room. When we're at camp, you can feel the anticipation, the excitement when kids are showing up. But this is a little strange for me. So by a quick show of hands, I would love to see how everyone is doing today. You can give me 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. I'm going to look over here at the camera. You can give me a wave. I see lots of great faces. Thank you, Kristen. Hi, Rebecca. Deanna, it's really good. Colleen, so good to see you. Energy is such an important part of camp. But even though I get to speak often in front of whether it's adults and kids, it just still feels a little strange to be here. And I always get this energy that I'm not sure what to do with. So what I want to do is ask for your help on a couple of things. The first one is that during our time together, I hope that this is something that we can share in learning from each other, learning from people that maybe we haven't had access to. But all those experiences will help us as caregivers, because I'm a caregiver too for my child, and we're caregivers for parents, but these are all skills. I know we're focused on caregivers of kids with serious health challenges, but I think there's some skills we can all benefit from. But so that you'll gain from some experience, you'll build some community, because that's a huge part of what we do. You'll gain some resources, and you'll grow in comfort and confidence in your role and in your personal lives. So like I said, before we get started, to get rid of some of this nervous energy that I have bottled up when I speak in front of a group, I want to warm up a little bit, and I want to invite you to join me in a quick exercise. Now, this might be a little different. It might be a little unique. This is totally normal for something that we do at camp. But in a moment, not yet, I'm going to ask for some music to be turned on and encourage you to join me in a quick morning, it's close to morning, dance party. Yes, you heard right, dance party. Now you're thinking, I'm sitting in my office, I'm sitting in my home, maybe there's people around, maybe there's not. But like I said, this is a total normal experience at camp. And there's a purpose behind this playful experience, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But for now, I'm gonna ask Amy to turn on some music. And thank you for that. Now, I don't know about you, but that is one song that I cannot just help myself. It makes me move, whether I'm in my car, if I'm hearing it on the radio in a restaurant. I haven't quite got up and started to dance while I'm eating dinner or anything like that, but it just moves me inside. Now, I would say, perhaps not gracefully, as I'm sure you witnessed, but there's just something that I can't resist. Okay then, so that's a little bit about my experience there. I'm curious for you, how did that feel? Now, I would love for you to put in the text box, maybe what kind of emotion, or were you moved, or did you actually stand up and dance? Because I imagine there's a whole lot of feelings out there. One might be amazing. One might be, well, that was fun. It could be unexpected, maybe even awkward, embarrassing, uncomfortable, all of the above. Regardless if you danced or not during that time, it's okay, because ultimately it was your choice. I got to meet a friend this summer, a woman named Radha Agrawal, who started an early morning dance community program called Daybreaker, and she also authored a book called Belong, which I would highly recommend. Again, it's Radha Agrawal, and the book is called Belong, but she believes that dancing is downright scientific because it releases your brain's natural happy chemicals, or as she likes to call them, your daily dose. Now, I checked this out with Dr. Becky yesterday and made sure that I actually knew what I was talking about. I was always worried about speaking about things medically in front of a group that know a heck of a lot more about medicine than I do. But when you dance, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins are all released. Those are things that help us feel good, if we let them. So now the other reason that I invited you to dance was to illustrate something I hope is a key takeaway from our experience and our time together. But we'll get to that in a moment. At camp, when we bring people together in a community, be that our volunteers during pre-camp or when our campers come at the start of a session, early on, we start out with the community agreement we call our camp code. We ask everyone to kind of follow that and agree to it. And since this is the beginning of our family care conference, I thought we might do the same. As camp director, it's one of my responsibilities to help promote our community. So because I have the honor of speaking near the front, I'm going to take a hit from my job, and I'm going to ask you to do the same. Now, our camp code is something that we truly, truly value. It's the foundation that helped inform our philosophy of our camp program. And it consists of, and especially for those of you that have been to family camp or summer camp, it consists of 5 important things: safety, respect, love, challenge by choice, and fun. Now, we're going to take a quick moment to understand the history of how we got to this code. My first professional job in camping was managing a ropes course. Yeah, I had a very cool first job in camp. I was able, in preparation to start that job, to enroll in several adventure-based workshops. This is where I went and got training about how to tie knots and how to set up a course and be safe. But a huge component of that was understanding why adventure and experiential education worked. So I was able to dig in a little bit of the theories that describe how people grow through experience. Now, the experiential education movement grew out of a 1930s experiment in the United Kingdom when a gentleman named Kurt Hahn first applied these principles of a curriculum that placed equal emphasis on the development of character, leadership, and a sense of service along with intellectual studies. In 1939, World War II broke out, and a partner in a large merchant shipping enterprise, a gentleman named Lawrence Holt, insisted that faulty training was the cause of many sailors' unnecessary deaths in the Battle of the Atlantic. In fact, he told Hahn, he said, "I would rather entrust the lowering of a lifeboat to a sail-trained octogenarian than a young sea technician who's completely trained in the modern way, but has never been sprayed in the face by salt water." At this, Hahn proposed starting a new kind of school in Wales, and it included a one-month course that would foster physical fitness, enterprise, tenacity, and compassion amongst British youth. They agreed to name this school Outward Bound. This training was less for the sea than through the sea. The distinction, training through rather than for, is at the essence of the Outward Bound and experiential education dynamic. The sea, the mountains, the desert, they all provide training that no institute or university could offer. Now, these landscapes, in tandem with outward bound principles, teach the hard technical skills necessary for survival, but they also teach relevant skills necessary for life. Now, outward bound has evolved, but never departed from those original concepts of creating intense experiences surmounting challenges in a natural setting. And through this, individuals build a sense of self-worth. A group comes together with a heightened awareness of human interdependence, and all grow in the concern for humans in need or in danger. To me, that hints at camp. And I'm proud to say that I earned my Outward Bound pin over the Millennium New Year. So in the year 2000, I was in Joshua Tree National Park with my patrol. And I figured if that whole Y2K thing actually happened and the world fell apart, I would be way ahead of everyone else because I hadn't taken a shower in about 10 days and been living off the land. So I was feeling good. If I came back to a complete crazy society, I was prepared. But through that, I trust that my belief in understanding why camp works is thanks to the foundations that I learned about the power of experiential education. So now back to my first camp job in the ropes course. Often prior to climbing, a group would work together through a series of team challenges to help build trust, communication, and teamwork. Before that group would begin, we'd have a conversation about how we wanted that group to work together. Sometimes these were individuals that all came from the same office. Sometimes they were folks that came from different communities. And in general, most arrived at very similar conclusions. They wanted to be safe. They wanted to listen. They wanted to be open to others' ideas, and they wanted to commit to being present. Oftentimes it was easy to say those things, yet more difficult to actually implement them. But there was one item that was consistently left off this list. It's the concept of challenge by choice. Now, to provide some framework for this concept, we also have to consider where learning takes place. Now, the model that I've relied on and is often referred to as a zone model. It's pretty simple. It's one we use a lot here at camp. And it's represented by this idea of these concentric circles that that suggests there are three zones that we identify with. Now, most of us have heard of a comfort zone and a panic zone. Sometimes we live in those and we're really able to kind of understand what those mean. But the one that we want to focus on today is the growth zone or the learning zone. And that finds its place between comfort and panic. So think about this. Think about an archery target. In the center, the bullseye, which is typically red, there's blue. It's cool, it's calm, it's comfortable. And then way on the outside, the third ring, that's where red lives in this model. And that's the panic zone. That's the frightening, scary space that we don't want to spend too much time in. And then somewhere in the middle, there's this large green area. And it's really big because it allows us to have some freedom to figure out where we want to work within there. And this represents growth. So if you take a moment to reflect and when it was that when you grew the most, I would imagine that it wasn't when you were completely comfortable or completely panicked. Sometimes we learn down the road from some of those experiences, but ultimately those are generally not choices, especially when we're in the panic zone. So it's somewhere where you felt discomfort, but yet believed you were relatively safe. Now, this model is built on the Yerke-Dodson law. This is something I learned in getting ready for today's talk, which says that peak performance occurs when people experience a moderate level of pressure. And when there's too much or too little pressure, performance declines. And experiential education has embraced this model as it directly relates to the concept of challenge by choice and knowing your limits. I read the paper by a gentleman named James Neal that historically challenge by choice evolved through the early efforts to transplant this outward bound movement from the United Kingdom and the idea of impelling into challenge or somewhat pushing into challenge, taking this philosophy into an urban educational experiment called Project Adventure. A gentleman named Carl Rocky, who had been an outward bound instructor for about 3 years at that point, was one of the 4 original Project Adventure staff. And he coined the term challenge by choice because he found that urban youth were resistant to participating in adventure activities within a school setting. Ronke also felt uncomfortable cracking the whip and coercing people into challenge on Outward Bound programs. When he decided instead to let participants choose whether to participate, he felt a tremendous sense of relief and freedom as a facilitator. And he found that the participants did too. I also learned from the Project Adventure website that for them, challenge by choice means giving participants the choice to determine their level of involvement or challenge in any given activity. No one's forced into doing anything they don't want to do. The motivation to participate comes from within self, rather than from external influences. However, challenge by choice is more than simply saying no to something and pulling away or out of the activity. It's about creating a safe learning environment for participants in which helps them make appropriate decisions in an atmosphere of care and support. And in essence, the aim is to empower participants to make their own decisions and take responsibility for their actions, but also encourage them to give it a go. Again, in creating the right environment, this is very, very possible. So choice not to participate, or more often to assume a role that's more comfortable for the participant, is always respected by the group. It's empowering to allow an individual to have some self-determination. Real success in learning occurs only when individuals choose and commit to their own standards and goals that are personally meaningful. Now that, to me, sounds even more like camp. And I had the chance to meet Carl Ronke several times over the past 25 years through workshops or at conferences. Something else he gave to the industry is the word fun. Now, he didn't spell it the normal way. He spells fun, F-U-N-N. And he was dubbed the fun father of American experiential education. So FUNN stands for functional understanding not necessary. And this is again from the PA website that says, obvious fun, it's hard to stay away from. So the fun model, functional understanding not necessary, that element of a program goes a long way towards involving everyone's participation. Fun means it's okay to be involved in activity for no other purpose than simply enjoying it. And sometimes the games we play at camp are just that, to have fun. Facilitators or participants don't need to have a special reason to do an activity. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. They do it for the laugh, the play, and the good feelings it creates. And part of that, again, is choosing to be part of that. The results of fun, functional understanding not necessary, are surprising. And indeed, it's possible to know more about a person through 5 minutes of play than it is in a week of deep conversation. And a quick note, the world lost Carl Ronke a couple weeks ago on September 20th at 83. And I have to believe that the afterlife just got a lot more fun. One other component of my kind of journey to getting this challenge by choice thing wrapped around my head was in 2006, I volunteered at Hole in the Wall Gang Camp in Connecticut. And during the first day of our program, now Hole in the Wall was started by actor and philanthropist Paul Newman. It was the first camp within our network. And during the first day, I heard the rules of camp explained through the concept of safety, respect, and love. Now, this was something that we've adopted here at North Star Reach, both to stay connected to that history, and because I believe it makes sense and is aligned with the experiential education model. A few weeks ago, I was fortunate to connect with Matt Cook, who was the camp director when I was there at the time. And I asked him the origin of where the camp rules came from, and this is the story that he shared. He said in the early years, so this is like late 80s, I believe, a camper was having a difficult time at camp and decided that he was done and wanted to go home. So he packed his suitcase and started walking down the road. I've actually seen this happen a couple times, and it's always interesting. It's this balance between feeling compassion and sadness that a camper isn't having a positive experience and wanting to go home, with the idea that they think they can just start walking and find their way. So fortunately at Hole in the Wall, the path is a very, very long path to get to the front gate, which is the same here at North Star Reach. So we have a little time before we actually have to worry about the camper going out on their own. But the staff worked hard to kind of redirect the camper and help him make a better choice instead of taking a walk. But eventually they invited Jimmy Canton, who was the camp director at that time in the late 80s, early 90s. And Jimmy walked along and was having conversations and eventually found himself blocking that camper from taking a walk down the road. And after some negotiation, the camper calmed down and ended up going back into camp. But when the session was over, Jimmy didn't feel good about that experience. He was really troubled with why that camper didn't want to stay at camp. So he called Dr. Karen Carlson, who was a psychologist and a volunteer with Hole in the Wall, and asked for some help. Jimmy said he didn't want to make rules for kids to follow, but was concerned about how to create a community environment where kids would feel safe, respected, and loved. Karen said, well, I think you've solved your problem. Those are your camp rules: safety, respect, and love. It seems that covers just about everything that we would need to be concerned about. And that's the moment that brought it all together, for me at least. And that's where we developed the origins of our camp code: safety, respect, love, challenge by choice, and fun. Because they brought together the components of experiential education that I think creates the foundation for kids to be successful. Now we choose, as those familiar with Pirates of the Caribbean's Captain Jack Sparrow would say, stick to the code, right? Like, it is something that is very important to us. But actually, we evolved that code from something we used to call an agreement or a contract. But we call it a code now because we believe that it's a great way to relate to young people that have experience in coding and understanding that if the code doesn't function well, the experience doesn't happen. So bad code keeps a program from working. And if we all follow the same code, our time together will be much more enjoyable. Now, most of our code makes sense, right? I mean, safety, be physically, socially, medically, emotionally safe. I mean, respect, be respectful of others and yourself. Be respectful of our amazing camp and our environment. Love, act out of kindness, be generous, be thoughtful. And well, functional understanding isn't necessary, right? Fun is simply fun. But the challenge by choice piece is something that most folks have not heard before. And that's because generally, challenge by choice isn't the way our world works. It's challenged by peer pressure, especially for young people, or embarrassment or fear. Parents and teachers teach safety, respect, and love. Kids pretty much know how to have fun because they're kids. But where do we learn challenge by choice? I suggest we learn it through camp. So at North Star Reach, we define challenge by choice as your ability to choose, not if to participate. So we have a little different perspective than I think the origins. It's not choosing if to participate, but it's how you participate. You can't just back out of something altogether and say, no, I'm not gonna do that. But you get to determine for yourself the best way for you to be involved. Now, that's taken a little while to get here, but I believe that it's important to understand the big picture of why camp works and how we can apply it in our own lives. But before diving too deep, I have one more exercise I'd like to invite you to participate in. One that I learned from another really important influencer in our camp world, a gentleman named Michael Brandwein. Now, Michael is an internationally recognized speaker. He's an expert on management, communication, leadership, team building, and customer service. He has presented in every one of the states, most of the provinces of Canada, and 6 of 7 continents. Now, with a resume like that, it's hard to understand where camp fits in. But camp is Michael's passion because he went to camp as a kid. He worked at camp as a late teen and young adult. And along with his parents, camp helped shape who he is today. Actually, I heard that quote from one of our past board members and volunteers, Dr. Skip Walton, in his camp experience, said aside from his parents, camp is one of the most influential things in his life. And that really dawned on me that that's exactly as it is for me as well. And if you volunteered here at North Star Reach, whether you know it or not, you have learned from Michael Brandwein. So in a moment, not yet, for those of you that have been here before, that is a classic Michael Brandwein saying. I'm going to give you 2 words that might describe a person. What I'm asking you to do is to please decide for you which one of those describes you best. Now, if we were in the same room, I would ask, if the first of the 2 words describes you best, please stand up. And if the second describes you better, you would stay seated. Now, if neither fits, you get to decide which one fits you better. And since we're not in the same room, I'd still like you to ask you to stand as you're able to do that so that others can see that movement in motion. It also helps get the blood flowing because we've been sitting for about probably almost an hour now. However, I know some of you may be at work or in a place that whole standing and sitting is not ideal behavior. So if you choose to not stand, but it still relates to you, what I'd love for you to do is put your hand up and wave at the camera so we can kind of see that happen. All right. Let's practice. We're not going to actually stand at this point. This is just going to be kind of a mental exercise, but we're going to work through it, like I said, with our minds. So if I were to say right-handed, left-handed, what would the righties do? You would either stand or you would wave and put your hand up. Doesn't matter which hand. That's perfect. Yeah, you would raise. And if the lefties, they would stay seated or not put their hand up. That's perfect. So after you stand, I'm going to ask, after you stand or remain seated, I want you to do two things for me. The first is do your best to kind of look around the screen and see kind of where there are some commonalities. Are there some other folks, all the righties, all the lefties? See how many people are standing or seated. And then the other, once we've kind of had a moment to do that, I'm going to say, and down. And when you hear down, if you're standing, please sit and be ready to listen because we're going to go through a number of these reasonably quickly. And I know you're going to want to make sure to hear the words so you can figure out whether you should stand or sit. All right, here we go. Curly hair or straight hair? I can see the dilemma. Excellent, take a quick look around. Good, all right, and sit down or put your hand down. We're gonna go a little quicker here. How about creative or not creative? Excellent, thank you. Okay, and down. Chocolate vanilla. Perfect, and down. How about patient or impatient? Getting a little risky. Sharing a little self here. It's okay, we're all friends. All right, and down. How about organized and messy? If I couldn't get any lower in the ground, I shouldn't be sitting, I should be tunneling underground at this point. As if you could turn the camera around, and I'm sure all my coworkers are laughing about that. Awesome, and down. All right, how about shy or outgoing? Super challenging because those shy people are the ones that are supposed to stand right now. That was very intentional. All right, and down. Excellent. Only a couple more. Spender, saver. Again, I probably climbed through the roof on this one. Great, and down. HGTV, ESPN. Awesome. Math or literature. I'm sorry, and down, forgot that part. Next one, math or literature. Go math. Love me some math. All right, and down. Logical, emotional. That's great, and down. Listener or talker? Excellent, okay, and down. Forgiving, unforgiving. Nice. All right, honest or lying through your teeth? Hard to tell on that one, isn't it? All right, leader or follower? Now, none of these have, okay, and down, thank you. None of these have any huge kind of pressure associated with them, right? I mean, these are simply kind of choices. Awesome. Okay, two more, and then we will be done. If I could ask, everyone, please stand or raise your hand as you are able. Perfect. And then everyone, please sit down. Great, thank you for being very attentive and listening. So now I have three important questions. Listen carefully, don't overthink, because there are not an intent of having a trick. There's not an intent of having a trick question here. The first question, who just told you to stand up? as my son would go, this guy. And the stand up at the end, it was like, who told you to stand up? Who told you to sit down? Again, that was me. The third question, when I said creative or not creative, shy or outgoing, leader or follower, who told you to stand or sit then? Right, that was yourself. You were the one making that choice. We told ourselves which one of those we aligned with. Now, I have to imagine, because I know for me, that always feels better when you get to make that decision. Now, just imagine what that's like from the perspective of a child here at camp, because we give them the choice to see themselves as they choose. It's all a part of why we try to create this environment where campers can see themselves in a way that's maybe different from how they see themselves in the rest of the world. So what can we learn from this? I think at its simplest, it's about the power of choice and the impact that it can have on our identity and our attitude. And one thing that I miss most kind of as a part of this pandemic, it's the opportunity to choose what I want to do. I mean, I know that I have that choice, but I feel like there's this pressure of I want to go out to eat, but I'm not sure. Love to go to a movie. I can't do that. Top Gun Maverick, I'm dying to see, and it's not even available. The new James Bond movie, I don't even have a choice to see those. Going on vacation, again, we're making some decisions about whether that's safe or not. Go to a sporting event. You know, the high school football stadium is about 400 yards from my house, but we can't go because we're not parents of a player. I mean, even just to hang out with friends, right? Like, we have to make some really difficult choices that's creating some pressure. We've lost the freedom of our choice in a lot of ways. So even though we don't make, in my family, those choices often, like we don't go to every football game, we don't go to movies every week, it's the opportunity to choose that makes me feel empowered. And I think that's the one part of this whole experience for me that has kind of left me feeling a little unstable. It's like there's stuff I want to do and I don't get to make that happen. So choice itself is very, very powerful. And in fact, we often talk about the power of choice, and sometimes I think we actually get confused about it. We miss the point that the power comes from having the ability to make that choice, and not necessarily in what that choice may lead to. In other words, we think choice is powerful because of the rewards it might avail us to, but what's really more powerful is the fact that we get to make that choice, any choice, whether it's good or bad, because oftentimes we don't know what that outcome is going to be. And I believe this is especially true for our campers, because I have to imagine, I don't have this experience, but I have to imagine that much of their lives involves other people making choices for them. And that's hard. But I have to also believe and assume that that's true for parents and caregivers. And even when choices are offered, especially when they're medical choices, they're incredibly difficult. Yet there is still a power in being able to make a choice. When I was asked to talk this morning, the idea was to talk about challenge by choice, community and play that can inspire you to become your best self. Now, this is an approach to cultivating personal confidence and growth through intentional choices and play. I think that this is a topic that is much bigger than a 40-minute keynote. There are week-long workshops and entire books dedicated to this topic. But my hope is in the brief rest of our time together is we can learn from what we've talked about now and what we do with our campers, and perhaps incorporate some into our own lives. And I'm going to tell you, this is hard. I'm a camp director, and I do a much better job of this in my job than I do in my life. So now what? That's always the key question. Exploring this is another important part of experiential education, and it's learning from debriefing. Again, the Project Adventure website talks about, at the end of an experience, conducting a debrief or a review of an activity provides an opportunity for people to come forth in their own perceptions of what it all means. Now, these are questions that are generally guided by a facilitator, and participants can talk things out and tackle relevant issues, such as communication, leadership from within the group, opportunities and challenges, things they did well, things that they struggled with. But it can also provide feedback to one another and raise significant learning points. My favorite debriefing model, and one that again my staff will often hear me say, is based on three simple questions: what, so what, and now what? And I believe answering those questions works just as well as an individual if we take the time to do so, as it does in a group. So the question of what, and we've done a couple of these today, the question of what is what helps us focus on our experience. And that allows us, as either a person in our minds or in a group, to come to some agreement on what we are considering. Today, we're considering challenge by choice and learning some of that history of experiential education, exactly what challenge by choice is. The so what question speaks to the value of those experiences. And that's the piece that oftentimes I talk with camp staff about, is that you are the so what at camp. Kids have these experiences, and sometimes maybe they're not quite as ability to connect the dots. And our job at camp is to add value to those experiences by teaching, by listening, by facilitating, by debriefing. And so it's understanding why the what is important. The so what challenges to identify the importance or priorities based on our experiences. And it's what we think about the what if we choose what we want to do. And I know that's confusing, but I'm saying is if we can think back to what that experience is, understand why it's important, then that allows us to dig into our next question, the so what. So I'm suggesting that we as caregivers can take the important concept of challenge by choice, one of the foundational values of our camp culture, and apply it in our own lives. Again, like I said, that brings us to the most important and powerful piece, I think, of the question, or the now what. What have we learned in our time together that we can possibly apply? Now, for me, in spending time preparing and thinking about what we could talk about or how I could communicate some of the things we do at camp, I chose to use myself in a playful metaphor, because that's what camp directors do. We like to use metaphors. And I danced on camera in front of all of you and be recorded. So this is, it's going to end up on the internet someday, right? And in my job as camp director, I spend much of my time up front doing exactly this. I am comfortable and confident in many of my abilities, but I will tell you, dancing is not one of them. I am not a comfortable dancer, and if I'm truly honest, it's not because I think I'm a bad dancer, it's just because I think I look absolutely silly doing it. And based on today, I may. I had my eyes closed most of the time. But if you know anything about me, I'm more than willing to look silly doing just about anything. I mean, spend any time here at camp and you'll see that that's a big part of who we are and what we do here. I mean, come on, you can look, I have kind of some blonde hair right now, right? Like that was a silly thing to do. It kind of looked ridiculous for a 51-year-old to go out and bleach his hair blonde, but it was a part of a camp experience. Now it just looks like bad frosted tips, which people joke with me about. But dancing is the one thing I struggle with, and I just can't seem to get over it. And that in itself is kind of silly, right? I mean, there's no good reason for dancing in public to live in that giant panic zone. But I let that happen. And the crazy part is I actually love music. You can ask anybody that I work with. Music is such a huge part of my life. It's a big part of my brother's life. I have had so many incredible music experiences, and I love the way that music makes me feel. So why not express that through dancing, right? I used to dance all the time in high school and college. That was a big part of culture. Matter of fact, I danced in front of a whole bunch of people with my wife at my wedding. But for some reason, dancing is my kryptonite, and I stay as far away from that as I generally can. But somewhere inside, like most things, I actually really wish I could dance. When I see other people, I'm like, wow, I wish I could do that. Because ultimately it makes me feel good, especially when you're in a community of others. But I just can't get past what I think and allow myself to enjoy what I feel. From that, challenge by choice is an attitude that we can choose to adopt. And I think sometimes we do this without thinking as we navigate our daily lives, but it's not intentional. We choose the quickest, easiest, most logical path to juggle all those proverbial balls that we are keeping up in the air at the same time. I know that that's what I do, right? If I got 3 stores to visit, which one makes the most sense? What's going to be the most efficient? How can I get all the stuff done that I need to do? It's not really thoughtful about the way that experience is playing out. But even though we can default to this sometimes, my hope is that we can be more intentional about the things we choose, like we are here at Camp, and identify areas and opportunities that we can push ourselves into growth without the pressure of achievement tied to that attempt. So it's taking all the pressure off. It's choosing to do something intentionally because of the benefit it may provide, rather than necessarily worrying about the outcome. Now, maybe for you, that's self-care. Maybe that's asking for help. Maybe it's exploring something you're afraid of or something you're excited about or kind of fearful about actually trying to take that on. Maybe it's simply making new friends. Because I know that lives of families with serious health challenges can be very isolating, and there's just so much to explain, and are people going to like what we bring to the table? No matter what, it'll take courage, vulnerability, and some grace. Now, courage is what is needed to attempt something that might scare you or feel uncomfortable. Vulnerability is something that you need to bring because you have to accept that in attempting whatever this is, it may or may not work out. The grace is important because that's allowing yourself to find joy and satisfaction with your effort, and the idea that it may take multiple times, but at least you're taking steps to grow towards becoming your best self by being intentional. Now, I would say that you have already made a choice, an intentional choice at that, to be here today and join a community of others who also made the same choice of wanting to grow. This Family Care Conference is for you, and there are presenters who are sharing their thoughts, ideas, and experiences because they want to contribute to your life. They'll provide the what and the so what. It's up to you to choose the now what. Which brings us back to the beginning. I always like to bring these stories all the way back to the beginning. And now that we've spent some time together talking about our camp code and explored the concept of challenge by choice, I would like to ask you to make that commitment to yourself and to our community that is gathered here today for our care conference. I'd love you to consider safety, respect, love, challenge by choice, and fun as a guide to your experience. Now, that may seem like a lot to remember, but we've taken care of that for you because we have a handy reminder. Our version we call is our high five, right? We take, on one hand, we remember that safety is number one. We remember to be respectful because sometimes that finger is not a respectful finger. We remember to love because that's the ring finger. It speaks to commitment. It speaks to caring for others and represents those things. We want you to not forget challenge by choice. It's the pinky finger. It's the one at the end. It's the one that we often forget. And of course, we want you to have fun. So to seal that deal and acknowledge acceptance of this camp code, I am going to invite you once again to join me for a group from where you are today dance party. It is your choice. Amy, can you kick up some music for me again? So this is not to warm up. This is to get you moving after sitting for some time in this keynote. It's to get another dose of those happy chemicals. It's to demonstrate your agreement to our Family Care Conference Code, take full advantage of the community gathered here. But most importantly, it's because you are choosing to do it. Thank you.